I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda is a series of minutes that we'd like to go through. May I ask for a motion to amend the agenda to add in the minutes from the public hearing on April 19th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's start with those. Public hearing minutes, April 19th. Any discussion?
They were fine.
All those, I'm sorry?
They're fine.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes, thank you. Next, we'll do the regular minutes on April 19th. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. I have some changes to these. Paragraph 5. The sentence that reads as follows.
You're on April 19th?
I am.
The regular meeting.
Regular meeting minutes, so we have two sets. We had
Sorry.
Go ahead. Paragraph 5 is discussion and possible action regarding operating and capital budgets. In the first paragraph, there's a sentence that reads as follows. She suggested that the board consider moving the referendum, which will also require that they hold a third hearing to be in compliance with the timing dictates. With the timing dictates of the town charter, of the town ordinance. So what that should say is, she suggested that the board consider moving the referendum, which also requires that they hold a third hearing to be in compliance with the timing dictated by the town charter. It's not an ordinance, it's a charter requirement. Okay? Then in the paragraph now at the bottom of that page, I thought it was very difficult to follow the description of all of the different graphs by the words that were there. So I just suggested that we simplify this quite a bit and just say bar graphs depicting 5 different possibilities for handling debt service / capital were projected onto a screen for all present to see, and each was reviewed and considered, and drop it at that.
Yep.
And I would remove the next whole paragraph because I tried to change it and it just got really complex to make it so it was understandable in the words. And then the next paragraph, which begins, Ms. Pettigene asked the board whether they are looking to cause a tax increase. I think that probably was said a little bit more along the lines, Ms. Pettigene asked the board to consider whether they are willing to consider a tax increase. And then there's a lot of run-ons in this, so again, for next time around, I know we talked about simplifying them just a bit and kind of just summarizing at least all of the motions need to be in here, but there's a lot of detail here and a lot of run-on, which may be the way I speak at certain times, but it's good to edit them so that it's clear when the reader's getting the point. And then the paragraph that talks about Ms. Hebner also noted that school projects are often paid for through a 15-year bond. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4th full paragraph on that page. I would just leave it at that, but if you want to add a comment, what I said was that I had worked with town staff. It looks like the board took an opinion on a 15-year, that way that's written already. We haven't even discussed it as a board, so I didn't want any of that in there. I thought it just made more sense to have that be omitted, and it just read, Ms. Hebner also noted that school projects are paid for through a 15-year bond.
I would leave the third sentence though, that in all given possible scenarios,
Okay.
that the numbers around the results is that the capital budget has to be good. I think that's a pretty critical statement.
Okay, that's fine.
So just take out that middle sentence.
Okay, that works for me. And now I'm in item 7. The sentence about this OPEB thing is a little confusing. I suggest that first paragraph under other items be omitted and the following replace it. Ms. Pettigene reported that the actuaries who analyzed the pension funding recommended that the same interest rate assumption be used on all funds. They specifically recommended that the 7.5 interest rate assumption on the OPEB fund be reduced to 7% to match the other funds.
Did we have a motion and approval on that? Because
I believe we did too, and it's not reflected.
it's not in here. Does anybody know for sure? Can you check, Sean? or-
Double check the video.
I mean, the consensus is great, but
Yeah, it's not an
Right,
official
I'm-
vote tally.
Right, I think there was a vote, so can we just check the minutes and make sure that these get amended again to reflect a vote? If there was one taken in, if there wasn't, let us know because we probably should vote on that. Did anyone else have some changes to this set? Come on.
No.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have the motion be amended to be the minutes as adjusted?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so next is the public hearing on 518. These public hearings are easy, they're nice and short. Minutes anyway. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I have one change. Mr. Rinaldi's comments noted the decreased enrollment. It wasn't over the past couple of years, but over the last 15 years.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who made the motion and second on the 7 funds?
Oh, is there a motion? Could I have a
I'll
motion?
move that.
And a second, please?
Second.
Okay. And now we have discussion with an amendment.
Yeah, so just change couple of years to 15 years.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, next we have the special meeting on May 18th. And for these, I just have one tiny change. Well, I guess that's not true, two tiny changes. Paragraph 3, in the third paragraph down, we're talking about what had already been approved against the 1% budget allowance, and it's described as heart and hypertension. Could we just change that to read the heart and hypertension settlement?
Yep.
It's a little confusing that we're paying heart and hypertension out of. And then the other change is paragraph 4. And we'll have that it ends with a requirement of 30 days. And I think how that should read is, in order to meet OBM's requirement for filing the name of the audit firm. So I'm on paragraph 4, on page 3 at the bottom. Oh, I see, there's lots of different 4s.
Yes.
So if you go to the main paragraphs, it's 1, 2, 3 over here, and then now there's a 4 on page 3.
What doesn't
Mine is
include
another.
four?
Yeah, mine.
Yeah, it does.
Item 4 on page 3.
Mill rate consideration?
Oh, on page 3. Sorry, I thought you were on page 2.
Page 3.
The bottom of page 3,
Appointment of auditor.
numerical page 3.
Right. And what it reads now is Ms. Pettigene explained that with the resignation of the former finance director, the board did not get out to bid in time in order to meet OPM's requirement of 30 days. And that's very confusing. The board did not get out to bid in time in order to meet OPM's requirement for filing the name of the audit firm. So there isn't a 30-day requirement, there's a requirement that we file the name of the audit firm we're going to use, and in order to file on time, we didn't have time to go out to bid.
And you can take the in order to.
Yeah, you can.
Did not get out to bid in time to meet OPM's requirement.
Yep. So there's a lot of that kind of thing in these minutes, and I think we
They're so
probably...
much better than they've been in the past.
They are. I think this one had more in them, probably because there was so much. Those are the only changes I had. Did anyone else have changes to this 7 minutes? Okay, we have a motion and a second, and can we have that amended as...
We didn't have a motion on this.
We didn't? We're going so fast we didn't. do
Okay,
that one.
may I have a motion to
So
approve
moved.
the minutes? Okay.
Moved by
And-
Ms. Schofield, second by Ms.
And it is as amended?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. This time I'll get a motion first, how's that? May I have a motion to approve the special meeting on June 7th?
Come on, you guys, it's your turn.
Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
Well done.
And I just had one small change on here. Paragraph 4 on page 2. It says that there was a threat coming from the state level. I think it would be coming from the state to take more money away from the towns. We can take out the word level. And, I mean, again, this is just kind of in the language. She explained that the board's budget was done based on the latest information from the state legislature. And then that estimates, an ongoing story, and that the estimates received to date were numbers the town could cover through the reserve levels. Because who knows what other estimates we're going to get out there going in the future. And then the last sentence, I'm not sure what I was saying, but just that we have a healthy reserve. I think reserve position, there should be a period after that.
I'm sorry, where?
At the very last sentence of the
that
same paragraph, right. And this is just wording on the next one, but Ms. Pettigene reported that the appropriations approved through the referendum allows the board to hold the mill rate flat for next year. It's just clear.
So I just make a comment. The comments like the last sentence, I mean, we had a discussion about the mill rate and the interaction with the state, and then we took an action.
Is all that needs to really be in there.
Exactly. You know, we made a concerted effort at the zoning commission
To simplify.
to take the discussion out of the minutes, and I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, we've sort of gone back and forth on that, actually. I mean, I think it's difficult for folks who are reading this if they don't get any of the context or discussion. So I sort of appreciate having some of the...
Some of it's okay. This has gone now, I think, a little bit beyond what we probably need. So I'm not, before we said we were only going to record motions and votes,
Yeah, that's...
and that's a little
pretty
too
minimal.
extreme, right?
But there are really supposed to be a record of the action.
There's a public record, which is the
Yeah.
tape and
That's not this.
transcript. This is the minutes of action. I take exception.
So you really believe all it should say is, so one of the things that started our discussion last time was that if somebody voted against something, they wanted the right to reflect the reason they voted no. That was really where the discussion started. So it's obvious when you have a motion and people support it, but if one person or two people vote against it, to have them say what their reason was in the minutes is not an unreasonable request.
I do agree with that. But
That's where this started. So then it went from that to now getting all the way back to this level of detail. So I think we could ask, can you take a stab to simplify it a bit for the next one, and we'll talk about it again? Can you agree with that, Rob, for one more?
Yeah,
Let's put it
sure.
somewhere in the middle and see if we think it's still too much. Okay, I think that we now have approved all of the minutes that are in front of us. Can I ask, sorry?
we haven't approved it. I would just say.
Oh, did you have something else? Sorry.
No, I'm going back to number 3. I don't have the little piece of paper somebody gave me, and I hope somebody checked these numbers. That's all I say.
Me too. Yeah.
Vote numbers?
Yeah. So on all of these, even the numbers.
I have the town clerk's official one on my desk in there, so I can double check.
So we need someone that's reading through these to make sure, even when we do the dollar numbers, that they're all right. We're reading them, but when we're proofing the minutes, we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the source document to check this. That's all right.
So can we ask you in your role to make sure that the numbers in here at least are right? Sure. When we're proving something.
So these have been moved and seconded.
They have you and
Right.
all those.
Were we holding on for the next meeting? I thought you'd asked.
No, not for these
Oh,
minutes.
no, just in
Oh,
terms
okay,
of
okay.
making.
So for this minutes, all those in
So
favor?
the only thought before, and it could be that my memory's not altogether clear, but I thought I had, at this meeting, maybe it wasn't this meeting, complimented our interim on what a great job he was doing. So maybe it was intentionally left out because you review these as well, Sean.
I did not take anything out, no.
And I thought his accolades were.
You want your accolades in there?
The accolade I thought was worth mentioning, which
I
was-
can't say I recall it.
No, I said
did,
that.
Jeff.
I said at one of the meetings. I just don't remember if it was this one.
I recall it.
Would you like it added to the minutes?
I really would, because I think it's an important public statement, because I
Okay.
think it was pretty heroic work in the face of a lot of
Okay,
A lot going on this year, particularly, so thank you.
so let tonight's minutes reflect we're adding that. Okay, as amended, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we've officially closed the minutes. And for next time is what we were requesting, that we get a little less detail. And to what level it
Good thing you
is.
got that accolade now.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, we didn't already know detail, at least not yet. Okay, next, can I have a motion to amend the agenda?
To do what?
To move item 6 up above item 4, and the reason for that is it's the only other thing we need to do as a board to take action on tonight. Might as well get that out of the way.
Sure.
And all the actions are done.
Just in case any of us like heels over before we get there.
Just in case, yes.
I'll move we amend the agenda to consider item 6.
I will second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you for that. And item 6 is a request by the Board of Selectmen to accept money for a charging station to be placed at Town Hall. And I would like to compliment our acting finance director, because this submission actually has in it an analysis in paragraph 7 of the operating costs associated with the charging station.
Yes.
And this is a request that we've now asked for everything coming in front of us, to not just look at what it costs to buy it, but what it costs to own it after you have had it in for a while. So he's estimated electricity costs, and as I understand it, would you like to address it? They're all little swags.
I can tell you, yeah, I mean, this is a pretty new technology, as you can imagine. Our project administrator over at DPW did analysis by talking to a number of towns that have these. Obviously, the electricity costs are dependent on the amount of use. This was the moderate to high usage, really somewhere between moderate and high. It's pretty significant usage at $1,000 a year. It's really just going to depend on how many electric cars are coming through and using it. Annual maintenance, frankly, there's no moving, with an electrical station, there's no mechanical parts. It's all electric, as you imagine. Most towns responding said there's really no operating expenses at all. That being said, every 4 to 5 years, it's possible you may have to change out an electrical cord, the actual cord that goes in to keep them fresh, and they can run about $400. So I put $100 a year as a potential payment. That's not expected to be every year, but that would certainly fall within our maintenance budget. And then the insurance one is the last piece. We won't have an immediate budget impact on that piece, but from, as I said here, about $100 a year of premium increase in the event that after Irma has went through all the potential liability exposure increases, if there are. That's the absolute maximum it would be. I don't anticipate seeing that in an actual premium increase anytime soon. But these are all, I would say, conservative estimates. Conservatively high.
And Sean, I thought I remembered reading it, but I can't find it now. Is there a 3-year commitment to have this up and running as part of this?
Since the second paragraph.
It is here? Okay.
That is correct.
Okay.
I don't know, I can try to find out what it is.
Okay.
And then, one important note, what we were requesting here is not unlike the 1% discussion we've had before, 1% supplemental to the fiscal 16 budget, although this does fall into a different 1% category. So you have Charter Section 809A, unlike 809C, which is really the 1% we've been looking at before. 809A is expressly, as I think I say at the bottom of the first page, you have the ability to approve supplemental appropriation when any, which has been or is expected to be funded wholly or in part by state or federal grants. And that's what this would fall under. So it's separate. It would not affect that total running of 1% from an authorization.
Okay. Any questions, any discussion? So can I have we didn't do a motion yet. So can I have a motion to approve?
Second.
And are you asking us to accept the money or set up a fund to put it in? Where are you putting the money?
Well, so what you're looking at here is actually the agenda submission form that was sent to the Board of Selectmen. So
Right.
it was a twofer. They had to both accept the grant, but all that you would need to do is do the fiscal 16 supplemental appropriation.
So it's this year's supplemental appropriation. And where's the money gonna go? It's just going into general fund?
It is the
You're not,
money coming in, well, so this is a reimbursement grant, so it would come in to the general fund in
Got it.
probably the next fiscal year.
Okay.
But in order to expend the money now, and there is a requirement, as the state, although they only awarded this to us a couple of weeks ago, they also said we are only guaranteed the money if it is billed by June 30th of this year, so it's pretty rapid.
They had their benchmark targets, right, 2000.
Right.
15, 16. Yeah. I'm happy to hear we have the money in our budget. Just a little less money that gets turned back into general reserves at the end of the year.
Correct.
well, we're really appropriating this out of reserves. That's what he's asking.
Oh, you're asking us to appropriate out of reserve?
Yes.
Essentially, that's
reimbursed.
what you have to do, right? Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was going to come out of the current operating budget.
Right, so this would be an expenditure, we would be increasing one of the expenditure lines, I believe it would be a $10,000 increase to the Clean Energy Task Force line. I believe
That's what we've got.
Plan on public agencies for it, and then we would hit any associated charges to reimburse the construction and installation of this, would hit that. So, right, just not unlike your other 1% from reserve, that's essentially what we're doing. This will be fully reimbursed, and it is expected $10,000 will cover the entire cost of installation.
So we're within our statutory.
Right, so the net will be no impact on the capital side, it's just, it will probably be the fiscal years, given the timing. Here we are near the end of the fiscal year.
So the motion that we need is to approve it out of our supplemental budget under Charter Section 809A, $10,000 for the vehicle charging station. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Well, we already
Yeah.
moved.
Oh, we have a vote.
We're amending the movement.
Okay, is it clear what it is? I just did it again because there was some confusion. Okay, all those in favor? Thanks. Okay, so now we're on to the Finance Director's report. Item 4.
All right, good evening. I will be fairly brief this month. On the revenue side, you should have my memo in the packet. On the
Thank you
revenue,
for that.
everything is, good, thank you. The revenue is tracking, continues to track very favorably here in fiscal 16 as we've been reporting. I think I say up front, the building permit fees continue to be coming in above the average, so we had another 118,000 come in from April and May since my last update, I believe. So the total is about $459,000 above budget, with still June remaining, so we should certainly cross the $500,000 mark that we were anticipating. Tax collection rate, again, continues to be good news. We are already standing at 99.49%, and so we'll, I would say, certainly cross 99.5 with the collections from the current month. So that's great, as I think I noted. This time last year, we were at 99.38, so we are, again, tracking, and that, of course, helps our reserve balance that we've been closely watching the last few months. Just wanted to sort of recap the fiscal 16 supplemental budget items, because I know there's been a number of them. The ones officially approved, at least according to all the minutes that I've read through the last fiscal year, are the Cushman, the heart and hypertension settlement. There's maybe why we should have the word settlement in there. And the Board of Ed turf field project that you approved at the meeting prior to the referendum. The other items, we still will need to be, as we wrap up this fiscal year, and I'll probably bring those to both the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance in July. As you know, those first two are really counted on as budget savings for the Board of Ed next year, so they will need to have them. But again, procedurally, I just need to get them to the Board of Selectmen first. And then there is still room in our 1% for the planning study correction that I believe you were briefed on way back when Joe first brought that up last November or December. And that's about all that will fit in the 1%, so that's what we have there.
So on that last piece, can I just ask, if we're closing the year with excess funds, unspent operating funds?
Correct.
I'd rather do a line item transfer before we come out of reserves. They have the net effect of the same thing, which I
They do.
understand fully,
Yep.
but it's a better practice
Yep.
to spend the budget and do a line item transfer.
Sure, so I can say, right, I've talked to the planning director in his own department does not, but yeah, to the extent we have interdepartment transfers, I do expect us to be obviously net favorable this on the expenditure side. We'll know more as all of June gets booked through our system. That's why it'll probably be July or August till we're actually closing this account. But I totally understand that. It does have the same effect, and it is sort of less use of the 1%, which I think is good. It's not a practice I want to be in all the time either. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And then really finally, just an update on what we have going on in finance. It's a very busy time, but we did successfully get the tax bills sent off to our processing system, and those should be showing up to folks. Maybe we've already got some, I'm not sure, very soon.
We're looking forward to it.
I've been eagerly checking everything.
Yeah, just check your mailbox everywhere. It's like a college acceptance letter.
Yeah.
Yay!
Again.
Yeah, right. And so, but that all went very smoothly. We are also, and I'll be having an update, I think, at our next meeting. We have all the bids received from the assessor, the revaluation firms. So we'll be discussing that soon. And David Gardner is still going through all those and communicating with them to make sure the scope of work is clear to all six and we understand fully pricing. So we hope to have some more information on that and get that rolling very soon. We also met last week with the Bloom Shapiro for our first initial meeting as we're starting to close out fiscal 16. Our initial meetings with Vanessa Rosito, the partner that we work with, and also the whole audit team was here for a week requesting documents and starting to go through and requesting comp firms and other information. No surprises so far, and we expect them back in-house in October as they start doing their testing. I did hand out, you should have at your seats, I got a memo from Vanessa today that goes to the Board of Finance. Those of you that have been on this before have gotten those before. Although it is dated June 10th, I'm not sure why it's dated June 10th. It did come in today. But it is nonetheless a memo to the Board of Finance inviting, really explaining what they're doing. I've also attached the engagement letter. But it's also, she wanted to make sure you all know that you are invited to communicate with them at any time during the process. And also, and some of you may remember this, in the past, in years past, there have been live meetings. We've actually had a meeting with the auditors during the process, so she'd like to extend that invitation. I have not actually been through that process, the stage of that process before, so she just sent me an email literally right before this meeting saying be sure to invite them and let's talk about scheduling a live meeting. So,
Does she want to come to one of ours, or would she like a daytime meeting?
I mean, I think it's whatever. I think either way would be fine. I can confirm with her. I did respond to her. I haven't heard back with a quick question, but
She came to ours and you came.
she came to it the last one. Okay, so let's assume that will probably be what we do, and then I'll just discuss with her what exactly is involved in looking at the schedule. So.
Sean, you didn't talk about the $20 million question.
The $20 million question, right? Well, which I wish I had more information on the $20 million question. That is a good point. I did email our primary contact at CCM on the $20 million question.
Could we explain to
Sure.
anyone watching this what that means?
It's a game show we participate in. So the governor did exercise his line item veto authority just before our referendum, I believe it was, right before the mill rate setting, saying that $20 million, really $22 million total was going to be the cut, the $20 million from municipal aid, and not really clarifying anymore what that was going to mean. That is still true, and as in my email from George Raphael from CCM just the day before, just on Friday, he said there's no more information, nor do they expect any for possibly the next couple of months. So I'm not sure if that's going to be true or not, but he said not anytime soon or nor within the next few months.
And then I read something, I forget where, that said that the education department has stated that the grants are going to stay the same for education, so that doesn't leave them much other.
For next year, right, so we're still trying to make sure we fully, that's my understanding. We also we did get confirmation on fiscal 16's numbers from the education side. They all lined up exactly with what we were looking for. I have not heard exactly what's happening with 17, so no, I don't know where else they will be finding that. So I'm not sure if those are one and the same.
That comment was in Sean's memo.
Yeah, did I misunderstand that?
But it was for fiscal
16,
15,
yes,
16.
sorry, okay.
And so those are two different things. I have not heard that said about 17, but 16 is settled. In fact, the EFTs are coming through. We just got one on Friday. So the electronic fund transfers are starting to come into our system now. They have to pay us right at the end of the fiscal year. keep us guessing. So we, but yeah, that money is all set, and so 16 from a revenue side from the state is pretty much assured. 17. Obviously
Not so much.
So,
Yes.
We did get one strange piece of information that is an unfunded mandate. The state emailed all first selectmen and mayors and said they're no longer going to be collecting unclaimed dead bodies, and we need to make arrangements with local funeral parlors to dispose of bodies and to store them. So that is a very strange mandate. It came from the CT medical examiner. CCM is working with Martha Kalina and obviously opposing that. It makes no sense to have 169 towns figure out how to manage a very sad situation where relatives don't claim a body, and what do you do with it? And it's always been handled at the
Any
state
idea
level.
how often that happens in Simsbury? I would imagine almost
Not
never.
Very
that
rare,
often, no. It's mostly a big
It's
city
a city
problem.
problem.
Yeah. But if it does happen, it's expensive. It can be
Right.
7,000,
You got
3 to
homeless
7.
folks.
How about municipalities where there are hospitals where it happens perhaps more often than places where
Jeff, you might know something about that.
Yeah.
Right, no, right, precisely. And they're trying to figure out the law, because sometimes it's where the body is, as opposed to where the body died or was found. So you wouldn't believe the amount of emails that have arisen over this. But we expect more unfunded mandates as they begin to cut things and departments begin to discover what money they don't have, and they push it off on municipalities. But that was one of the stranger ones that has come our way.
I wonder if nursing homes are equally impacted.
I'm sure they are.
And we have some of those.
Yeah, but most of those people know that have family.
Yeah.
all
Okay,
right, that's all I have for an update.
thank you for that delightful addition.
Yeah, sure.
There's more coming, we're sure.
Yeah.
You could put that on that show, what was it called, 6 Feet Under or something?
So I think the intent of Bloom Shapiro is if anybody has any concerns or suspicions or things that they would want an auditor to look for or know, they want to make sure that the Board of Finance knows that we can connect with them about concerns that we have.
We're going to complete that one again, I think, earlier, right? Which is whether we are aware of any, it's a pretty broad-based form, isn't it? Whether we're aware of anything that, yeah, each member, don't we each sign something each year that comes in?
Board of
saying-
Ethics, are you thinking
Conflict of
of?
interest.
No. It's saying, are you aware of anything that ought to rise to the level of reporting to the county?
There's conflict of interest if there's a problem.
This
On your
was-
election.
It was on to the library board.
Well, there's a town conflict of interest form that you are.
That's something of interest. There's a form, it was just, if we're, it's with the auditors every year, if we're aware of anything that, any concerns, controls, lapses.
I mean, we were asked those questions. I had my first sort of fraud interview last week when I was meeting with them. They asked those questions. If you have any, confidentially, any suspicions. I would not be surprised if that's a form. I haven't been through this stage of that process before, but that could be something that they send out. I think we'll send out. So, but I'll ask. I'm planning on connecting with Vanessa tomorrow morning, so I'll see if I have any of those to send out to you.
Well, let's not invite any new friends that don't already apply.
I'm certainly creative.
I'm not going to sign.
Unless Jeff wants to sign for all of us. Okay, how about on the Board of Ed side? I know you provided a report.
Yes, I forwarded the exhibit that was done for the last Board of Ed meeting. Generally, the intent here was to help to memorialize sort of what had happened throughout the process from the public hearing prior to when the Board of Ed had last put out a public budget to these changes, and sort of teeing it up so that both boards that are used to getting the quarterly reports when we start next year see how the major groups were changed as a result of the $289,000 decrease. So you see in there that the bulk of the decrease will be in the insurance pension group, and then down at the bottom try to give you a sense of, based on the use of non-lapsing, an estimate of how those categories might be needed for next year out of the $249,000.
Brooke, what does the
non-lapsing.
column title on the last column mean? third quarter what?
Revised budget. So
Revised.
essentially, that was the last third quarter budget. So you're really comparing that total increase of 1.51%. It's that difference between
Yeah.
the adopted
I
and
just didn't know
the
what rev was.
revised.
As opposed to rhythm.
And what makes up, not in great detail, but generally what's in your outgoing transfer accounts for the non-vesting?
That's by and large mainly your out-of-district tuition and placements. It's been an active spring for that, and we're working on the closeout of this year and preparing for next year's placement.
Anything else going on the Board of Ed side for the summer, or?
Just an incredible amount of maintenance and construction projects, and working regularly with Jeff Shea and comparing notes and trying to keep the project straight. So both Steve Twitchell, who's our supervisor of buildings and grounds, along with Jeff Shea and I are trying to get everything done during that summer window before school starts again. So it's an exceptional summer in terms of that work.
I have a question for you. When we were going through the budget process, you gave us an update on all the cost-saving ideas that we've all talked about in the past. And several of them actually said that there were things underway. Some of them we were expected to have done by summer, so I know you're not ready to do that today since I didn't give you any warning, but could next month you come and give us an update on the report that you gave us 3 months ago in March?
Sure.
Thanks.
So I think it might make sense to ask for that on both sides, because they were both asked to give cost-saving
Sure.
ideas.
Yes.
And if we're going to ask Board of Ed to give us an update, we probably ought to equally ask the town side to tell us what they're working on, what's new, are there any new cost-saving ideas, and what the status of any of the open ones are. Okay.
I was going to ask if for any of the approved projects that we expect beyond the books, I guess in the coming year, some of the new apartments and what have you, whether we expect an increase in enrollment. I don't know how many units total are going to be coming on the books.
There's been no change in the enrollment figures that were done by NESDEC since last fall, so we wouldn't have that information until the upcoming fall.
If we have more kids coming in, it looked like we could accommodate that with class size as long as it's across.
The issue, yeah, that's been the issue so far this spring that we've been tracking very closely, is the enrollments coming in, the so-called in-migration has been steady, a little bit faster, and been targeted in certain schools. So that's not helpful when you're trying to do that. So that's something we're keeping a very close eye on. And you don't know until you really get ready to start school. Sometimes people will move at the end of the summer. So we have some sections and classrooms that we're watching very, very closely, that it would appear that we're right at the class size guideline in certain schools. So we'll be finding out in the coming months.
Any increases in overall enrollment from what's projected is useful only because it brings our per pupil expenditure down.
Right. I mean, we're projecting a decrease for next year, but when we come back in the October 1, we'll see whether or not that decrease is larger or smaller than projected. There'll still be a decrease in it, quite certainly.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? Okay. So next we have a guest with us tonight who's going to provide an update on you doing the OPEB and the pension fund management. The reason that we brought this up is there was a charter change done several years back where it shifted responsibility to the Board of Finance for the funds, and that would be both what levels they're funded at and how they're invested. We do have a subcommittee, and each of the boards has members on that subcommittee, but this board has responsibility to make sure that it's being correctly invested and overviewed. So we thought it might make sense, and we have two. Actually, I don't care what we see tonight. members on that committee from this board that I'm sure you're familiar with. But we thought the whole board should have some responsibility for this too. And we'll have to figure this, whether we want to do it semi-annually or what's the best way to report. But we'd like to get your thoughts on that too.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Maybe it's easy for me to see. I stand, if that's okay. You do have hard copies in front of you. I promise you we won't use each and every page. Probably more content than you'd like to see tonight. And thanks for the introduction and the perspective, as well as Tom and Sean described to us. We'll give you a quick reminder of who we are and how we operate. And then I'm certainly...
If I may, I'll just start with, this is actually Chris Cashmore, who's worked with us, I think, since the very beginning, right?
Yep, so we've had, kind of going back through time, again, that's wistful on my part. Chris Cashmore, I'm the lead consultant from FIA who works with the town. I think we've been in town in a variety of formats, actually, for quite some time, but on a full retainer basis, I think since the middle of 2012.
That's right.
Is when we were first engaged, and we had done some project work prior to that. So if you'll indulge me, I'll kind of run through a little bit of background of who we are and how we operate, and then we'll cut to the chase, and we'll talk about the two pension plans, the OPEB, how they're construed and invested today, and some of the work that we do with your subcommittee. And that group meets quarterly, typically, to do reviews of the markets and allocations and the circumstances around the plans. If you're in your books, and behind tab 1 on page 4, just very quickly as a reminder, so we function as a non-discretionary consultant to your advisory group, so we don't have authority to move monies around without the explicit approval of the group that gets together. We make active recommendations. I think we're pretty proactive around that, but again, we don't manage the monies per se, and you'll see how that kind of bleeds out momentarily when we talk about your investment structure. We're based in Windsor, Connecticut. We've got about $45 billion of what we call fiduciary assets, like your own, that we advise to. We'll show you some more details momentarily. 100% employee-owned. And really, in the purest and most important sense, the takeaway from that page is we're not brokers, we don't have licenses, we don't sell products, managers don't pay us to be in databases, they don't sponsor our conferences. It is fully transparent, it's hard dollar fees for the services we render, and that's the only form of remuneration that we get. And we can talk to that a little bit if you'd like in greater detail. Page 5 gives you a little bit of sense of the breadth of the organization in Windsor. So myself, as your lead consultant on the pension and the OPEB, my colleague in the left-hand column, Tyler Polk. Tyler works with your advisory group on the contributory side, your defined contribution plans. And then Richard Carey and Kim Collins, Bill Garcia, Tracy Flynn. There's a whole host of a team that's back in Windsor creating a lot of the work product that we deliver into the field to you folks, again, on a quarterly basis. Page 6 and 7 gives you a little bit of sense. Public funds are a big part of our practice. We've been engaged in the space for a long, long time. We're at GFOA all the time. We're founding members of the Connecticut Public Pension Forum. We're engaged as speakers at seminars and other areas of interest for folks like yourselves, public fund trustees, and are pretty active in New England on that front. And on page 7, you get a little bit of perspective on just the scale of the business in Connecticut. So we are kind of throughout the state. I think we're the largest single provider of advisory services to public funds like yourself. And that bleeds through, I think, pretty prominently, hopefully, on that page. Any questions on credentials? We've been in existence since 2006. Prior to that, there was a team of a dozen of us that worked at UBS delivering the same type of services, but just over time thought that this would be better kind of construed and received in the marketplace being fully independent. So that's when we left en masse and formed FIA. Page 8 gives you a little bit of sense of the type of services we provide to your group, and it really does run the gamut. You can see it's pretty holistic and comprehensive. It starts on the far left with kind of the most basic questions. what's the strategy, what is the asset pool supporting, what are the type of liabilities in terms of the pension plan or conversely in the OPEB, building an investment policy statement and making sure that the larger allocation strategy is appropriate for the goals that you have, those 7% return targets that you referenced earlier. Certainly inform our decision around the type of allocation and the type of managers that are used, and again, we'll see that momentarily. We do a lot of work in the portfolio construction front and helping your advisory group select managers, review managers, monitor managers, occasionally change managers when we need to. As some folks who participate in that activity will tell you, we tend to be pretty patient. I think we know our managers and know them pretty well. And we're inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt, so we're not swapping managers in and out, and we are also, I should mention at the same time, pretty strategic and measured with the way we oversee portfolios. So we are not coming to your committee, time to get out international equities, time to put, all the money's in fixed income, we're going to go back in. It's a strategic, disciplined, consistent process. Be in the markets, have an allocations construct that you're comfortable with, and over time let that and the managers do good work on your behalf. Hopefully over time offer up accretive results over the broad markets.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
You mentioned the 7%. Are you guys talking about that moving at some point?
Well, I would tell you that in conjunction with the actuaries, and you've heard this, I'm sure, and we've seen it all over the state, clearly the direction and the pressure is to reduce rates. Right? So when we go out and do our asset allocation forecasts around what the return potential for different portfolios looks like, a balanced portfolio, let's say something that has about 65% in equities and 35% in fixed income, which is about where you are. A balanced portfolio, that portfolio today, we don't expect over the next 10, 20 years is going to earn out at the same type of rates that if we had done this exercise 10 years ago, it might have. Is 7% defensible with your current allocation? We would suggest yes. But it's going to be a challenge. The markets, you see where interest rates are, right? 10-year yields are at 1.6%. Equity valuations are pretty full. I don't think they're shockingly expensive, but pretty full. So it's going to be bumps along the road here, but our frame of reference is you have long-term liabilities. So we're thinking long-term in terms of strategy.
What's our return been like for the last?
So it's great. There are points in time over the last 7 years through March. I think you've annualized about 7.3%, through May rather, actually. More recently, the numbers, it's been a challenge.
Yeah.
And the last year in particular has been a real challenge, and there's no way of escaping.
What does a challenge translate into a figure?
He's going to get there.
Yeah, I think we'll give you some of that perspective.
Of course.
Well, he's on the committee, so he knows exactly what's in it.
So they're good questions. Again, strategically, I think 7% are numbers that we are comfortable with, but to answer the question more directly, there's certainly peers among you across the state who are even more conservatively allocated in construes and are expecting 6.5%, and in some places down in Fairfield County, there's even a couple of towns below 6%. That's an easy conversation to have in a vacuum, but we all know what happens when you lower discount rates. Contribution levels go up, and it's obviously a balancing act, and there's bigger considerations around those discussions. So again, quickly, 8 gives you the landscape just around the type of work that we do. Page 9 gives you a little perspective, stepping back from all the investment and market-centric stuff that we attend to each and every time we get together with the group. Other fiduciary responsibilities. We're really trying to help that group build a fiduciary trail around the decisions they're making, the rationale that goes into those decisions. So really anyone can step in at any point and say, here's a pile of information, documents, and work product that's kind of gotten us to where we are today. It's defensible, it's reasonable, we've considered all the options, we've thought about it hard, and that work product, all these different things that we attend to, we think gives you that comfort as fiduciaries that you're meeting your responsibilities and obligations. And then we'll cut to the chase here, I promise, in literally 30 seconds. On page 10, you kind of get a sense just from when all is said and done, what we're really, again, trying to do is build this governance process so that you importantly have a good, well-diversified portfolio. We're measuring performance regularly and testing that. And you've got kind of a structure in place that's really very thorough and well documented, and we think kind of puts you in the best place to reach your return objectives longer term. That's probably more than you wanted to hear on who we are and what we're about. Let's take a dive at the portfolios in tab 2 and page 12. This is a busy page, I admit, but what we've done on this one, you can see here, is just broken out the 3 town plans. They all share currently the same allocation strategy and the same manager rosters, right? They all have that 7% return bogey currently. And you can see here again what we talked about earlier, a portfolio that is kind of depending on how you cut it with the BlackRock strategy at the bottom of the page, which is a multi-discipline strategy. Numbers around 65-35 or thereabouts, in terms of larger asset allocation. You can see a couple of things come off this page, right? One is that if you can see the emboldened numbers and the current balances at the end of March versus the targets in the far right, there's not a lot of deviation from those targets, right? So this gets back again to what I mentioned earlier. You think the targets make sense, you think that's where you want to be, okay, based on the current return objectives and risk tolerances. So the portfolios aren't going to fluctuate that much around it. And really, when there are times along the year when money's needed, liquidity, for pension payments primarily, we're generally sourcing from those overweight managers, right? With that discipline to kind of trim from the winners and get the portfolio back aligned as best we can with the strategic target. So as the committee's, they're sick of hearing us saying, Rob and Tom and Sean can attest to this, you don't see great variability from those targets. We're always trying to have that rebalancing discipline, and again, mostly on the outs for pension payment liquidity. The other thing you see there's diversification by asset class, as you would expect naturally, right? Domestic equity, international equity, large cap names, small cap names, fixed income, some real estate, some other inflation protection, other things you see there. So there's that natural allocation and asset class diversification, and then there's entity diversification as well. At your size, you can get at pretty cost effectively what we think are good specialty managers. So you see a lot of different names there. And this kind of works for us on a couple of different fronts. One is it just imbues the whole effort with that diversification. And then moreover, right, if and when there's a problem with the manager, we can isolate it, we can address it with the committee, we can swap it out, and we can simply replace it with another like manager if we think there's someone else who can better fill the role going forward. So it works operationally very nicely as well. They're all, with the exception of Cornerstone, they're all institutional funds. You could liquidate 95% of the portfolio in 2 days' time if you needed to. So it's a very liquid portfolio. It's by design. Again, there would never be, I think, a need to do that, but that gives me some comfort that it is a liquid.
But do you sacrifice some return for that?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so, right? So that's a good point. All these managers are fully engaged in the mandates we've hired them for, so we're obviously sensitive to that. There's a lot of talk about, this is an extreme consideration, I suppose. Most of your public funds, I can't think of one we work with in the state that does it, the large state funds do it, things like private equity, where there's a desire for outsized returns, and they may in fact be achievable, but you do compromise liquidity, right? So on the very extreme, I think in certain asset classes, there are things that profile nicely. Generally in a public fund setting, and certainly a municipal setting, we won't see that very often. I think you can still get at your 7% return target with this type of configuration.
Is Cornerstone out of Mass Mutual?
Yes, exactly. Yes. So Cornerstone is the real estate team is in Hartford primarily. They are a Mass Mutual subsidiary. They barter in very high quality, grade A properties. A big, long-standing investor. We've kind of used them over time with yourself and a number of your peers, and to some extent, not only for that innate exposure to real estate, but the dividend that they throw off is pretty healthy as well, and it's thought of as a good proxy to traditional fixed income, particularly when you think about fixed income and all the discussion around where interest rates may be headed. It's kind of a nice diversifier away from that. But very low levered, high quality, barrier type markets, some Boston, New York, kind of on the coast if you think about it, and they've performed very nicely over time. The short answer is yes, it's the Mass Mutual subsidiary that does real estate. So to the question on performance, and this is what's really frustrated us collectively, both the committee and ourselves, and we can speak to this a little bit, but on the bottom of page 13, we just show you here for the sake of ease, kind of the swedged together numbers across the three portfolios, and you can see how difficult the environment has been more recently for return. And I mentioned earlier, these are the March numbers. So there's your 7-year number, right? So there are periods where that 7% number is readily earned and then some. And there are more recent periods in particular where it's been a real challenge, right? And I'm loath to say it, but I think that those challenges persist here for the next several quarters. We've got a lot of open questions that have not been answered. And whether that's the UK leaving the European Union, or what the Fed's going to do with interest rates, or what's happening in Europe, kind of teetering with very anemic growth. Is China going to land hard? There's a lot of things pressing on investor psyches, and I'm afraid we're just going to kind of bounce around here a little bit. In our minds, that doesn't mean that you step away from your strategic allocation. Because over the long haul, we think it still makes perfect sense, but it's going to be a challenge. And then the other thing you see here, which has been frustrating, is it's been a really, really hard time for active management. And I know, Lisa, we've talked about this in other settings, this whole indexing versus active thing. You've got both. So if you look back on page 12, as you can see there, if you can make it out, a full 1/5 of the portfolio in the form of the Vanguard fund under the domestic equity category is indexed. And why is that indexed? Because that is a really hard place, large cap U.S. equities, to harvest active return, net of manager fees. So our inclination there is to pay Vanguard a couple of basis points just to get that exposure. There are other areas of the market where we think they're more ripe for active management. I didn't mention it, but just so you've got it as a guidepost, the entire portfolio on a weighted average basis today costs about 57 basis points. So that's a little more than 1/2 of 1%. So if you took the expense ratios for the individual strategies and weighted them to target that, that's what you'd come up with. And on 13 on the bottom, the numbers you see there are net of that fee. So we do incorporate that into those comparisons so you can see on a true net basis. So you do, the 7-year numbers accretive. There are other periods not so much. Again, so this is this patience thing. We think you've got a good collection of institutional managers, most of them who will be up to task over the longer haul. And we can look at some more data in a little bit if you'd like. But we're inclined not really to make any dramatic changes to the roster of the allocation.
Can I get you to explain for me, I don't quite understand, the difference between the total plan versus the town hybrid?
Sure. So the the hybrid number is the benchmark. So if you look up in the upper right-hand corner of that same page, we're trying to tether that comparison to the way the portfolio is allocated. So if you see all that collection of indices there, right? So this is us to say, here are guideposts strategically, and again, it's as you can readily see here, right? Because the portfolios don't alter themselves that dramatically from the target weight, so the shortfall is not a byproduct of an allocation decision. It's been a little bit of a struggle for the active managers more recently. But that's the reference. It's our benchmark comparison for us to kind of keep tabs on the managers longer term. What else can I offer up on just in the way of results, numbers, comparisons, fees? So 57 basis points here. I would tell you don't see it here. We have a much weightier report for the subcommittee in terms of manager detail and analytics and things we go through and walk with them. We didn't think it was necessarily your interest. We're happy to share it. I would tell you that we do formally re-rate your lineup each and every quarter. And our due diligence staff is talking to these managers on your behalf on really a constant basis. We do have the entire complex on what we call maintain, which means that the managers are doing, it doesn't mean performance is where we want it to be longer term, but they're doing as advertised with the same resources, same team, same approach. And we'll continue to be comfortable having them in your program.
I have a question just on the returns. And Rob, I don't know, maybe you're someone that can look at this too. Have you guys talked about the fact that all years except the 7-year view, we're operating below the benchmark, not as well as the benchmark, and in all years but one, we're operating quite a bit below the 7%.
So it's a little bit of an endpoint specific of our reference. So the other way to think, and listen, it is, I'm going to get in trouble to say this, but I'll say it anyways, right? It kind of is what it is. It's a circumstance of the difficulty that active managers have had. What I might offer up, just to give you, look in the very bottom there, the calendar year numbers. So those numbers you see in the trailing performance are obviously rolled through to March and annualized, right? And sometimes those rolled numbers can kind of hide things. Another way to think about it, which I think is a little bit more constructive, if you look at the calendar year numbers, you do see there's plenty of times, right, where on that basis the managers do kind of come through, right? And what do you have, 5 of 8, I guess, where the circumstances are much better. So we are absolutely mindful of that relative shortfall and the struggles that the managers have had. So in our mind, right, what we're testing is, as difficult as a year as active management has ever had. You probably don't see this. We look at it, I think, each quarter. Merrill Lynch does a study of active management versus indexing. And for the quarter ended in March, it was the worst relative quarter for active management since the late 80s. I think something like 1 in 15 active managers outperform benchmarks. So the shortfall was pretty persistent across the industry. In our mind, it doesn't lead us to the conclusion that it's time to get out completely of active management. And in many ways, I think it makes the conditions kind of going forward more prime for some of these areas to perform better. The other thing that I hate to bore you with the details, so I won't do too much unless you'd like. You've had a lot of weird things technically going on in the market. So you've had this central bank influence, which has really been screwy for investors, right? Because it's very difficult to discern fundamentals from all of this influence that monetary and fiscal policy has had, and we've got to extract that all out of the system at some point. And then you've had what the financial economists would call cross correlations persisting very high. So all of that kind of effect of the central bank has meant that stocks have kind of traded in mass. Everything's done well. Everything's kind of, condensed, and that's typically and historically a very difficult environment for active management. Going forward, we started to see more recently evidence that those are starting to deepen cross correlations, and that has been a time generally where active managers have done a little bit better. So we are, I'm not going to answer for Rob, of course, we are completely mindful of it. We kind of test the premise all the time around the larger architecture of the program. Think it still makes sense, think that active managers should do better going forward, but it's been a really, really challenging time for active management. We'll look momentarily, in a minute, when we look at the OPEB trust, that's all indexed today.
Do you have a chart that shows, a 20-year performance of active management versus indexing?
We do. Go into, in the very back of your book, and this is something that guides us.
Look at that.
Look at, and I think page 35 might be the best expression. This is something that we look at pretty regularly. So if you can make this out here, what we've done is we've taken 4 indices in the left-hand column, and we've ranked how that index is kind of ranked within peer groups over time. And the way to interpret the chart, this is longer-term data. In our mind, the way to interpret the chart, if you look at the S&P index, almost, 86% of the time it ranks in the top half of the peer group. You see how if you take the first and the second quartiles and add them together, that's why we say, right, large cap U.S. equity, it's really hard for active managers to outperform. There's some evidence here to suggest that that persists. And when we go back to your program, right, you've got that Vanguard index. Because of data like this, start to make your way down the page, and Russell 2000 or small cap U.S. equities, right? Somewhere's on the order of, what is it, 46, 47% of the time, the index doesn't keep pace with the representative peer group manager. And you see some of that in the international markets and in the fixed income markets as well. So this kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of, the prowess, if you will, longer term of active management. There's enough representation in those, third and fourth quartiles for small cap, international, and fixed income investing, in our minds anyways, to suggest that there's an opportunity to identify those good managers, much less so the case for large cap US equity. So that's why we kind of, by and large, use indexing there exclusively. Does that help a little bit? And then on page 34, if you're looking right above there, you can see this is just data for the index ranks more recently. You get a little bit of a sense there, I guess small cap equities aside, but how difficult it was for a lot of the active managers to outperform the indices, ranking in the top quartile by and large, and in some cases even much stronger than that. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Happy to talk more about the pension, but maybe we can jettison and spend a couple minutes on OPEB, and then we can come back as often as you'd like. So if you look on page 14 of your books, I apologize for flipping around, the construct for the OPEB plan is a little bit different. Oh, and I didn't mention, the pension plans are custodied at Wells Fargo Bank. That's who basically is holding your funds on your behalf and helping make pension payments and the like. The OPEB trust on page 14 is custodied at Simsbury Bank. It is an entirely indexed portfolio, as you can see here on page 14. Those iShares are the Barclays iShares, or ETFs, exchange traded funds that are daily liquid and are designed to approximate index returns over the long haul. And again, you can see from an allocation perspective, no great deviations from target. And this has been the subject of a lot of discussion with your subcommittee. Is the plan starting to size up now at almost $12.5 million, where some active management may make some sense. So we've talked a good deal about that. We haven't gotten all the way over the hump just yet on that front. This plan, we talked about pension, 57 basis points of management expense. This plan is about 20 basis points of management expense. So as you would expect, right, using indexing is materially cheaper. And listen, that's been a kind of a winning hand, right? Certainly more recently. Indexing has been perfectly competitive with the active management, as you know. And you see on page 15, there's a little bit of fluctuation because some of the way the indices price quarter to quarter, particularly the international indices and some of the real estate indices, but those discrepancies true up over time, and you can see there, you've had this program in place for quite some time. I think it even predates us, and you've annualized, as you would expect, kind of right in line with what the broad markets have done. So a little bit of a different mentality there, and a little bit of a different structure. And again, ongoing, subject of ongoing conversations around where we are of size now, or maybe we do some active management. Again, no conclusions drawn.
Can I ask a question about payments coming out of this? So you mentioned on the pension side, the monies are all with, who did you say, Wells Fargo?
Yes, Wells.
And are they actually making the pension payments too directly as sort of a plan administrator? Mm-hmm. On the OPEB side, have we started making the payments out of here yet, or are we still holding on that? And can Simsbury Bank and Trust do the payments? Are they a fiduciary for that, or?
Yeah, so we have not made payments on this pool yet. So they're strictly warehousing your exchange.
How long are we going to do that for?
I would defer to the actuary on some of that.
It's a very good
We
question.
pay a general fund, so we're paying these benefits. This plan was set up to pay the benefits, but it wasn't fully funded. And so when you're setting it up, we said we would still pay the benefits the way we always had, which is what most towns do, you pay them out of your current expenses. At some point, we're going to be mature enough, and this ought to be established enough where this is invested so that the payments actually come out of here too, which will be a lift on the operating expense side, because now you're going to be actually taking the expenses for which this is designed out of it.
Right.
I don't know when the right time is, but again, these are the reasons that the Board of Finance should be, in some ways, thinking about how do we manage this and when.
I think it's a good question. I mean, it's one that we've kind of thought about. We haven't consciously concluded anything. We're only one cog alongside the actuary. And
Well, at what point did we start, this is way old history, I'm sure, but at what point did we start paying the pension obligations out of the pension fund? I mean, we're still not fully funded there, but at some point we
We've
started.
always been, haven't we?
As far as I
As far as we know, there have been periods of time, Linda, where the pension fund was 100% funded. We had, and so it's, and I think
That's what I'm saying,
we're
it's
somewhere in the
ancient history.
60s. Yeah, we're somewhere in the 60s now in the OPEB, so it's probably time to start looking at that.
So, but OPEB were how much funded at this point?
OPEB is
60, I think that's right, 67, something like that. It's pretty unique in that.
And we're one of the highest funded OPEBs in the state, so we're going to be a leader, and when it's time you start actually using this to pay.
the structure you described is very...
Would you normally pay before, you start paying out of it before you're fully funded?
I think a lot of folks have adopted the structure that you have, where they're building their corpus and then making kind of pay-as-you-go type for existing claims outside that framework.
Maybe you do some hybrid pay for it?
I haven't seen a lot yet that have gone full from playing within the plan just yet.
And Linda, we are one of the very few towns
Yeah,
that's as far as
which is
you've
great.
heard, so there's probably not that many comparables, that's all I'm saying, but it's probably a very good question for Milliman at this point.
I guess the question is also how many years out before we are at 100%? I thought it was still like 20 years away. So.
That's because of the way the actuaries are doing the investment assumptions. I mean, again, we should have the actuaries in here and talking to them about some of their same assumptions. Because they assume that the money's coming out of this, which is why this has grown to the extent it's growing. I think if you look at their modeling, well, I haven't seen it in a couple of years. I think they are.
Oh, really?
I think they are. But again, we need somebody that's looking across all of this. So we should get them in here too to ask these questions. Okay, thank you, Regis. Can Simsbury Bank be the fiduciary and
It's a good, I'm not certain of that answer. I will tell you that we've done some scratching around the surface, just pretending under the guise that maybe the committee wanted to look at some active management. There are a lot of strategies that Simsbury Bank cannot warehouse. Institutional mutual funds, they're not set up to do it. So we've had those conversations with them. I know, Tom, we've brought you in. They have been very forthright with us. We have a good working rapport with them, and we said there may come a time where this portfolio outgrows the capability of the bank, and they know that, and I think that they're very understanding of that. I think that might go in hand operationally too with some of what you bring at, that would trigger maybe a different operational solution, administrative solution. That could be Wells, in a piggyback fashion, behind the work they already do for you on the pension plans. And there are other candidate banks out there that we can.
There might be some real economies with that, but we have to go to RFP on it.
Do you know, what are we contributing annually OPEB in each of the budgets? Do you recall?
look it up.
We just run over. And we had put some more in, didn't we? Like
Yeah, we've been funding this to try and bring it up way above what we've had to. Well, we've had some excess funds.
200,000, I want to say, for the Board of Ed, for 16, 17. Yeah, on that I didn't bring the line.
No, I'm just trying to think of how that would favorably impact budgets in the future, but I think it's like 500,000 total.
I think it's under that.
It's not quite that high.
But it's not that far under, I think, right?
Well, I mean, it's an offset, because to the extent you start paying the claims out of here, you're gonna have to fund it more.
That's right.
So it's catching up faster.
Right.
It's a trade-off when the right time to switch over. And we should be looking at it.
We shouldn't wait for 100%, but.
Absolutely not. Okay, sorry to.
No, that's good, that's great dialogue. So that's OPEB. And that's really, in all frankness, there are flash reports for you if you're inclined and want to look at them. We don't have to, but behind tab 3, we ran some numbers through the end of May. The story remains, quite frankly, kind of a muted one from a total return perspective. I'm not going to highlight any of these unless you'd like to, but on pages 20 and 21 and 22, we reproduce the allocation grids for you, and it's really more the same from an allocation standpoint. And the markets, have been really very modest year to date. Kind of continuing on page 23 and really getting through all the detail here. And the same for OPEB starting back on page 26, but the story's the same. In the interest of time, I won't go through all the detail unless you've got questions on that. But if you're inclined, there's some more topical data there from a return and allocation standpoint. What did I miss? What needs more clarity?
So can I ask this of the people on the pension committee? Are you guys also talking about changes in the actuarial assumptions like lifespan? And they made some changes around turnover rates and they, from time to time, look at history and re-update how they're projecting. Are you guys aware of when they're making a change and what it is and they present all that?
They last did that a couple of years ago, and it had
That's a long time.
I think we're consistent with what they recommend as their best-in-class timelines, which is every 2 or 3 years. So I think we're probably coming up on the time when it's worth looking at them again. But that is something that's gone through that committee. And
we saw it 2 years ago here at Board of Finance. That all went in front of us and we talked about it.
I think that's the last time I remember. But that was. So
that's another thing that somebody somewhere should be looking at. I don't know what the right frequency is, but we kind of need to get on this board a little bit more ownership of all the moving pieces here to make sure we think it's all fitting together.
When I was on the pension committee, Becky had recommended every 5 years to do it.
The number, okay.
That's as I recall it, but maybe that's changed to 2 or 3. And it can certainly be your recommendation to do it 2 to 3, but I believe it did cost about $20,000 to $30,000.
The town paid the actuaries for a deeper dive.
Right.
And that is, I think, about the time frame that you recall getting much more of that.
I think that's so what they call that is an experience.
Experience.
And then they do their full valuation, I believe, every other year. They do their formal recurring valuations every other year, and then experience studies are supplemental.
More like every 5.
I think every 5 years is when a lot of people do it.
And as Burke says, that was a $25,000 venture with Millman. But yeah, Moira, you were on the committee when we last did that. But it would certainly, one thing, that committee can certainly have Millman come in and do an initial presentation on both of these things, on the OPEB investments and on the recommended interest assumption, then report it back to you. That's certainly one of the goals, is to make sure that we're on top of that stuff.
So, Rob, can I ask you, because you're the only one that's here, to kind of take ownership of how would you like to see this model work? So I just think this board needs to be more informed, and I know you guys are both new and hearing some of these questions maybe for the first time, but
no, I'd be glad to do that. Unfortunately, I missed the last meeting because I was out of town, so I've been the one we had in March.
Right.
So I missed the May, June meeting, but I will. And we'll create a list of important questions like the actuarial assumptions, 7.5, 7, and these kinds of things that impact both the assumptions here and how that interplays with our operating budgets and the amounts that we fund, don't fund.
We get for free from the actuary, like a trends report.
Did you say for free?
For free.
And the word actuary is the same sentence.
So as part of our fee, do we get like a trends report that talks about life expectancy of, I don't know whether they look at across, segments of the population. Do they get more?
Are you talking specifically for us or in general?
In general, like
they have a monthly email that it's called like Insights or something from Miller.
Right.
I can certainly forward that on when I get them to
Healthcare
you guys.
inflation.
But yeah, it's one of those.
Just to know, do they get as precise as, municipal employees, et cetera, or is it just more general?
It's usually
It's pretty general.
It is.
Yeah, they'd be happy to tailor it for us, but
For a bit,
careful what you
yeah,
ask
right.
for.
That data must be out there. I just don't know if we're to do our own research.
So we actually talked about this, Sean and I did, because when we talked about getting this board updated, my first question was, shouldn't the actuaries come in every year and tell us, here's what we've built? Because remember, we had trouble getting the data in time and it came in late, and some of it was we got them data late, but, should we set our expectations clearer and what our timeframes are and make them make their expectations clear of us so we make sure we make the timeframes? And I'm not sure, under the way their contract's written, we can even invite them in to discuss the contract or anything else without paying their rate to sit there and talk to us about it.
Who's your contract?
So, exactly. So we probably should be, and I don't know what the contract period is, but we probably should be thinking about whether or not, and it may be norm for actuaries that you can't get that in, but you would think there'd be some reporting included, some visit to talk to the client included when you're contracting with someone to do your work, but apparently it's not currently.
There are some, Sean and I have been looking at some interesting alternatives. Among other things, there are now systems, providers out there who can do a lot of the actuarial work, but do it essentially on a web basis, so that right now, every time we get a pension estimate, for example, for an employee, it costs us money because they do all the work, they apply all the rules, and we ask them, and a week later we get it back. It's getting to the point now where there are pretty good systems out there where employees will be able to log on, all the rules are built into the back end, and get that. So this is certainly an area where I think
Most large companies have that.
yeah, it's out there.
And so for each pension estimate,
Right?
We
To the
also,
actuaries.
and just to correct, I think it was what Chris said, too, we actually have been getting annual pension valuations. And for a while, it was every other year on OPEB, but 2 or 3 years ago, started doing those annually. So that's something you can discuss in terms of saving money and possibly spending it on a deeper dive. I don't know. There was a time that it was every other year, but at least in my recent memory, I have a valuation report for every year going back 5 years.
Since we've been here.
And those are expensive in their own right to do it. I don't know, we can welcome guidance on how necessary is it to have every 12 months evaluation. You really are looking at these very long-term liabilities. And maybe, I don't know, something for the board to discuss, whether you go back to doing one of those every other year and spend some of that saved money on a deeper dive.
Or how often is a deep dive best practice? I have no
Right.
idea. I was just asking the question because I know they do it from time to time.
I'm curious whether there's a correlation between how well we're doing relative to healthcare costs for active employees, and then how that translates to lifespans for. But again, I guess we don't get specific detail on even municipal employees. We're thinking, we have a healthcare municipal population, perhaps that's great for health benefits, but perhaps they live
Well, I can tell
for.
you from working in the insurance industry, municipal employees tend to be more expensive, government employees in general, more expensive health wise than others.
One other piece on that, though, we actually, on the town side, also have employees contributing to the OPEB themselves, too, which is actually, and that has now built up to a very significant number. So we have additional funding. So on top of being one of the most well-funded OPEB plans, we have all employees on the town side contribute to their OPEB as well, and share of their salary.
But that's going into the general fund for use by everybody?
It is, no.
No, that's going into the OPEB fund.
But each employee.
Has their own separate sub-account, or is it going into the general fund?
I'm sorry, all the money's being contributed.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That's part of, and we've had this discussion, I've had this discussion with Becky to clarify whether or not that is part of the ARC or not. We're contributing that on top of what we're contributing the ARC to.
And we're not paying out of it, so it's going to keep building.
It is building it, and it's building at a pretty healthy rate.
You're well ahead of most of your peers on OPEB, that's for sure.
Nice if we could You know, Simsbury's got to be loaded with retired actuaries. Find a good volunteer to.
Work for free, yeah. Do people have some more questions on the investment side?
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank
Thank
you.
you,
Hopefully
Chris.
that was helpful a little bit.
Was that no fee for that?
No, yeah, I would appreciate the conversation.
Thanks.
It's included with his fee.
All right?
All right. So next, so at 7:15, I guess we have one more thing that we still had on, which is Board of Finance policies, next steps.
Looking good.
What's looking good?
No.
The next steps are looking good? So I don't know what we have to talk about necessarily today, but what I wanted to do is at least go through the policies and make sure everybody knows what they're supposed to be working on, because it's been so long since we talked about this. It seems like this might be a good time before we get back again to have people restart this, and we want to make sure that everybody's got something they're taking a look at. The other thing is, I wanted to ask Sean if he could also read through all of these and give us his ideas, because one of the things we need them consistent language, looking the same. When they use the same word across two different policies, it means the same thing. You know, so someone kind of looking at it with a critical eye to make sure that the policies are drafted cohesively, because they were all drafted separately by different people, and I think we've got a hole there in the looking across. But then we also want to look at the ones that we want to update. Now, Linda, you have the lead on this. I'm guessing you have a book that has everybody's name next to it.
You got it.
And I knew you'd come with it tonight, so I was counting on you for this one.
Do you want me to read them off?
Yes, please.
Okay, the debt policy, that was me, that was supposed to work on that. Capital non-recurring is Jeff. The investment policy and the general fund balance policy we didn't assign.
Sounds like Kevin.
And he comes up later.
Be careful, you shouldn't
I know,
speak out
I know.
right now.
I know.
Let's see, investment, I think maybe that's because they were done in
Right, they're
2014,
new.
so
That is why.
pretty recently. The capital non-recurring budget savings fund, although that was done in 15, and Barb, you said you wanted to work on that.
I thought that was confusing when I read it. I wasn't sure how to interpret it.
The non-lapsing account for the Board of Ed, we did in 15 also, so I don't think there was anything serious we needed to do there, although I see I wrote down fix the comma. Oh yeah, well, there's one comma that needs to be fixed, I can see that.
So maybe on that one, Burke, can we ask you just to read that one? And now that we've had that fund for a year, does it still all fit what we're doing with it? And I mean, the whole purpose of these is so that we'll follow them once we get the fund set up, but now that we've had a fund for a year, I don't think we talk about how we use it if it's unused. I mean, we may want to add a little bit to that. But can you give us some advice on how you're using it and whether or not that works for you guys?
The pension investment policy and objectives. And the OPEB, that's actually a Board of Selectmen policy.
Which one?
But from 1995.
And part of that is that was before it got assigned over to us, so that's why we
There is
had it
a
on
much
the
more
list.
recent version of that,
Right.
which I said to the prior finance manager, the director, I will make sure you have the most
Okay.
recent.
Yeah, so that one, the OPEB trust investment policy as well, were both Rob and Kevin that were gonna look at those in conjunction with the pension committee.
So, Tom, can you send those, Tom,
You got it.
Sean, send me both of those and copy Kevin?
We'll do it. And that brings a good point. It looks like Joe was asked, I guess,
Yes.
through Linda, to put these all on our
Yes.
website. And they're all here, including some that you're just referring to, I believe, as either inactive or expired, or inactive. And including, I think that you said that last one is the one from 96 that's been superseded, I'm not sure. But that, so
1995.
this page also needs to be cleaned up, or at least they need to
Exactly.
be dated if we're going to.
Exactly.
We don't have a replacement, well, I guess, Tom, you just said
Yeah,
you thought you did find it.
there is
I think you use it right here.
Looked and looked months ago when,
It was, all right, it's.
We have.
We have.
yeah, when Joe
So,
was here.
generally speaking, when you have nothing to do on some Sunday afternoon, and you're at the beach, you can read through all of these, because the reality is we all ought to know what our policies are from the Board of Finance.
There's one more.
Oh, did you not? I'm sorry.
No, that's the
On
newest.
board
Is that
for the
the one?
GASB 34.
That's the one, that's the newest one for the,
So he should put, and I can update these, but we should have a date right up front, but it does look like there's investment policies, investment policy, and then this one down here. But I think the one that I just opened, this one is the current one
Yes.
from May of 15, entitled. I will clean this up and put dates next to it.
So you're gonna say as amended,
Right, I'll put it right here in the title at least.
Right, okay.
And then this, if this is an older one,
That's the 2014 one.
well, like I said, we'll go through these and
Well, that's why we have to do, that's why I thought if somebody's can look across all of them, that would be a good help for us.
sure.
And it would be a good way to learn too what we,
This one. Ah,
that's the old.
that's the old
That's the
one.
only one.
so does this even belong on the website?
No.
No, it's been superseded.
I can just delete it.
take it down.
Okay. So one down, that's good. All right, and then of course, if there's any missing, let me know. I'll get them there.
Well, yeah, if you don't have a copy of it, you might at least also want to look at it in case there's anything useful in it that you want to incorporate into an updated policy. So anyway, the last one was the GASB capital asset policy, which Moira was going to take on.
Are the operating rules up
Oh,
there?
and one other. So the one
sorry.
that we did.
Our operating rules to keep.
For the Board of Finance?
Yeah, that's not
That's
really
what
a
I was just
policy.
starting to say,
policy.
the rules of procedure policy, which
Yeah.
actually never got
Approved.
We approved it, I thought, but we,
We did.
yeah, but we never saw it in a sort of final form.
So
it
we've
just
often
needs to come
approved it
back.
after a conversation and then we never saw it
We
again.
never saw that, like, you know, written up in
I'm just saying,
proper format.
we should post that on the website when it's approved. Like just, then after the policies, it posts again under our Board of Finance page.
This is the Board of Finance page, yeah, I don't see, there's nothing under this is the quote main menu here, so there's no other additional buttons.
It was one of the last things we did before Joe left.
Yeah.
All right, let me check. So then I can look in some of his files or and that was the rules of procedure you said was.
Yeah, I have it if you
Yeah.
need to look at what it looks like.
There was one slight change, I remember I sent the modification over, I'm sure it's in my email if I need
On
to
what?
find it.
Okay.
Just you guys asked me to make, I think it was something.
Okay. So, not that I'm trying to rush people, but everybody's got their name next to one.
Yep.
And for next time, what I would like to do is, let's have it on the agenda, we're gonna have it as going forward. If there's anybody who's brave enough to be ready, can you let me know before the next meeting?
Can I make a
do it?
suggestion? I would suggest that we identify some to take on and ask everybody to, I mean, whoever has the lead on it shouldn't be the only one
Who reads
trying,
it, right.
trying to read it. We should all read it and give the lead person our comments. So pick whichever one you want and let's,
So specifically,
All
which
take
ones
that
are
on.
mine? The investment policies and investment policy and the OPEB.
Pension investment policy.
Where's the pension?
It's not called that.
well, yeah, there's a,
Oh, Simsbury pension plans, investment policy?
right, yeah, you don't need to
These
do
are
the
the
one that
only
was
two.
done in 2014. You need
Right,
to-
right.
So you said Rob is the investment policies.
So our reserve policy, we updated in 2014 or 15.
Yeah, and what we're looking at these now, they're not necessarily needing an update. They're needing someone to take a look. We want to look across, we want to make sure we use words the same way. We want to put together policies so that now we actually own some policies that are consistent, look good, and they may or may not require any changes. But if you have questions and you're reading it and you weren't part of having it approved, then guess what? Somebody else, when they pick it up the first time, is probably going to have those same questions. So it's good to have fresh eyes read these and say, what did we mean when we wrote this? And that's the reason to reread them all. Now, does somebody want to volunteer? Linda's is asking that I put somebody on the hot spot. I'm not usually inclined to do that. So does somebody want to be ready for next month so that everybody reads their policy and we'll come talk about one policy?
Next month is not a good month for me. When's our meeting next month? It's
You don't have to.
Yeah, the CNR, I can take a look at CNR.
You want to have CNR as a discussion? Okay.
Take a look at the Gazette.
Yeah, and I'll do debt. and
Let's just do
August.
one, okay, we'll do one at a time, okay. And Jeff, if you run into trouble, let me know, because I think mine's even easier. CNR capital piece might be even easier than yours.
Okay, well, so on which policy am I thought I was doing?
You're doing
You're doing
CNR, there's two
Capital
CNR,
non-recurring.
Do I do the, I'm doing the capital non-recurring.
right, but then there's another CNR in debt saving, or project savings one.
The budget savings
Yeah,
fund. Oh,
that's
yeah,
the one
yeah,
that I'm
yeah.
supposed to be doing.
That-
Okay.
That's from 2015, though.
I know, but read it, you'll see why. Okay, so I would like to ask for a motion, and I don't know if we're gonna get back in this room, so I'm not sure how we're gonna do this, but I would like to ask for, to amend the agenda to allow a motion to go into executive session. It will be quick, but we really need to leave the room, and we can use the first selectman's office. So I would like a motion to amend the agenda to add an executive session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Barbara, if we probably better do the whole text on this just for the record, in the email that I sent. You have to be very explicit about the
Does it
basis
take
for
more than
the...
5 minutes? Because isn't the
It
next
should,
meeting?
no, it should not take. Can I just say, I'm not sure, so it's a motion to go into executive session to discuss the appointment of the finance director, a permanent finance director for the town of Simsbury, subject to the Board of Selectmen approval. Okay, and so we have a motion to go into executive session and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And now, if we had a motion to amend the agenda, I'm sorry, and an approval to amend the agenda. All those in favor to amend the agenda?
Aye.
And now I need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second. And
All
just,
those in favor?
just so I ask very quickly, we cannot take a vote in executive session.
Correct, we're gonna have to come back on the record, so we need you to wait. But you may get kicked out of this room because there's a meeting, we believe, coming in at 7:30, which is
But I
why I
haven't
was trying
seen
to rush.
anyone in the hall yet, so let's just do this quickly.
If there isn't, we'll meet you right outside of her office
If you
and
need to
put
go,
something on the record and we'll
I
be
can
done.
send you the final minutes of the session.
No, we adjourn after.
Wait, no, he gets it.
Are we unlocked still?
So you want to...
I want us to talk, not in front of the camera.
Yeah, so are we leaving or?
Yeah, we're going to the
Turn
selectmen's
the
office.
camera.
Apparently they don't want to do that. I'm not sure I can. So if you don't mind, just stay 5 minutes.